Now, let me introduce you all to the resource speaker for today. Today, we have with us Ms. Geetha Gopi. She is a rehabilitation practitioner and psychologist. She is also the director of professional development and programs at Shah Shakti Karan Trust, Kochi. With over 30 years of experience in helping children with special needs, she's worked in international schools following an American curriculum for inclusive setting primarily for more than 15 years. She's done intensive work in curriculum development, adaptation, behavioral management, coordinating and promoting best educational practices using universal design for learning principles among staff and parents. She's also launched the Early Academic Series, a teacher's kit for teaching early English language skills and basic math based on the universal design of learning. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, ma'am. Before I hand over the podium to you, I'd like to let all our participants know that the current session would be for 2 hours. The session would begin with the knowledge sharing by our expert speaker, followed by the Q&A discussion. While we begin our session, the chat would be switched to the host and the panelist mode so that we can all focus on our speakers sharing. Wish you all a happy learning. Geetha ma'am, do I have you with me? Over to you, ma'am. We're all excited to hear from you today.
Thank you, Revati. So a warm welcome to everyone who is attending the session. Once again, Ability has come up with a workshop. Today's workshop is on phonological awareness, the start of the phonological awareness, the early part. So I'll just straight away go into screen sharing. So today's workshop is on developing phonological awareness and sight word recognition to improve fluency or reading fluency in children. So last workshop, we had talked about the LSRW skills, that is listening, speaking skills, which are necessary and which go hand in hand and quite often is a precursor for reading and writing skills. We had also discussed how important LSRW skills are in the light of academic and holistic development and school performance. And we had talked about the different kinds of challenges children with special needs have in developing speech and language skills, which in turn lead to deficits in listening and speaking skills, and how it is important to develop these LS skills so that a good foundation for reading and writing skills can be laid. We had also discussed in that workshop about the different strategies, the techniques, which help promote the development of listening and speaking skills in children with special needs. We had also discussed activities that can be done so that so these skills are well, are developed, and they can lead into the pre-academics or the moving into the reading writing arena when they come into school. So today's workshop is a continuation from where we left off. Today we are going to discuss about what is reading, what is its purpose, and what are the different prerequisites that are necessary for reading. Why is phonics important? Why is this teaching of phonics important to enhance reading skills? Again, the specific challenges that children with special needs face in all these areas, in building phonological awareness, in building reading fluency, in sight word recognition, etc. And we'll discuss the different strategies, techniques, and activities that can help us promote these kind of skills in children so that they are not left behind and they can have better academic output or performance in their schooling years. So to start off with, let's understand what is reading. Reading is an activity or an act of looking at text or printed words and decoding the words. Decoding means by either by sound or by the shape or by the look of the letter, understanding those symbols that the printed matter portrays and say them aloud. That is basically what is reading. Why do we read? There are several purposes which reading serves. It helps us to learn, to gain information about a particular topic. It helps us to deepen our sense of understanding about a given topic or a given area. So it helps us to think more deeply, go more deeper into any given topic if we read further on that particular topic. So it helps to develop a better level of understanding about a particular topic or better level of comprehension. It helps to expand one's vocabulary or, what we call as the word pool, to use better words, more appropriate words in given situations. It helps to improve one's written expression or expressive writing skills. For example, if you want to put your thoughts in the form of writing and communicate your thoughts in the form of writing, reading is something that leads into not only understanding a particular topic and developing the vocabulary, but finally it leads its way into better writing skills. On top of all this, it improves creativity and imagination. When we delve into the world of books and we start reading, it fires our imagination. It helps us to be more creative. It helps us to develop a lot of cognitive processing skills such as logical thought, sequencing things, being able to critically analyze. So all this involves a lot of creativity and imagination, which is fired off by reading. When we focus on reading instruction, particularly when it comes to the school ages, there are two broad areas that where we focus on. The first one, especially in the early schooling years or in the primary elementary schooling years, it's learning how to read. So the focus is on, at that stage, children are not yet as much exposed to reading. They're not reading experts. So they have to learn how to read. So the focus is mainly on learning how to read. And this is mostly done in the primary or elementary schooling years. And then as they proceed to middle school or high school years, the focus is slightly different. The assumption is that children would have already assumed, acquired the requisite reading skills. And therefore, when they move into middle and high school years, the subject content or the curriculum content matter increases exponentially. And therefore, they have to read in order to be able to master or learn that subject curricular content. So therefore, there is a slight difference in what the focus of instruction is in the primary years as well as the middle and high school years. So from learning to read, we proceed to reading to learn. Prerequisites for reading. One of the biggest prerequisites for reading is phonological awareness. The word phonological means relating to sound. So sounds are very important. The spoken word, that is the speaking and listening skills that we were talking of in the earlier workshop. The spoken word is now being slowly converted into or moving into the printed form. So phonological awareness includes a wide range of skills, and there are different stages of phonological awareness that takes place. If you look at the visual that is provided, there are almost 10 stages where there is a lot of overlap between these stages, but still 10 stages of phonological awareness. It starts off with, in the early years, from birth to 2 years, it talks about listening and speaking skills. There are a lot of the spoken language, the receptive and expressive language is developed. As they move further up from age range 2 to 4 years, more of oral word play comes in. By then, the children have a fair amount of vocabulary, and then they begin to be aware of rhymes. For example, they start singing rhymes, in whatever language they're exposed to. And many of these rhymes have sound patterns which repeat in the same manner. So children tend to enjoy that, tend to catch on to those kind of things. So it shows that they are having some kind of an internal awareness about rhymes. And then when it proceeds to stage 4, which is from 3 to 5 years, which is, primarily the beginning of the preschool years, or what happens is syllable awareness happens. Syllable awareness is being aware of the spoken words, but being aware of sound units in a particular word. For example, if you're talking about the word water, so wa and ter. So two syllables in that word. So being able to kind of understand sound units in a word and say it, even when they hear unfamiliar words, they're able to kind of very automatically break it into syllables, not necessarily knowing it is a syllable, but being able to do that process of breaking it into sound units, especially if it's a difficult word or if it's a long word. You find children are able to break it up and say it. And up until now, it is still the spoken words. And then we move on to stage 5. Again, here it's more still to do with spoken words. We talk about onset and rhyme. Onset refers to being able to understand what is the beginning sound of a word. So for example, if you say a word cat, the beginning sound is k. And if you ask them to give us, orally give us words which have the same sound as cat, they would be able to do so. So that's, being able to understand the beginning sound of a word. Rhyme, this rhyme is different from RHYME. The RIME rhyme means after the onset or the beginning sound of the word, the rest of the word is known as the rhyme. Like it is the rest of the sound proceeds is known as rhyme. So onset and rhyme, for example, if I give you a word mat, okay, will be the onset because that's the beginning sound, and at, that will be the rhyme because that is the what follows after the onset. So again, children start becoming aware of this. So if you prompt, say, the onset sound, they may be able to complete the word, or vice versa. So this is again stage 5. And then we come into phonemic awareness. Again, still to do with spoken words. Phonemic awareness is being aware of the sounds in the spoken word, and this is usually connected to the listening and speaking skills. So we ask them, we can ask them things like which word begins with the same sound or which word ends with the same sound, and so on. So again, these are all still very oral activities. Everything relates to more spoken words. And then we come to stage 8, which kind of coincides with stage 6 and 7, where phonics start developing. And phonics per se is where we come into the print. From spoken, we are moving into the written part of it, or the print part of it, where letters are introduced, letters of the alphabet, and the sounds which were earlier spoken sounds start getting connected to the letter, or the shape of the letter. So the letter sound relationships, which is known as phonics, start developing. And then stages 9 and 10, where it's 5 to 7 plus, where, using the phonics ability, they're able to read, write, and spell. So all these different stages come under the wide umbrella of phonological awareness. And phonological awareness forms, one of the biggest pillars of, starting off, or the precursors to the actual process of reading. So why do we have to teach phonics? I mean, we've talked about the phonological awareness. A good part of it was covered in listening and speaking skills. Now coming to the actual phonics part of it, why do we have to teach phonics? That is sound-letter relationships to children. And this is intensively backed by research. If you look at the global scenario, a very high percentage of children who lack proficiency in reading or drop out of school, become school dropouts because of low academic performance, usually attribute their dropout causes to low reading levels or low reading abilities. The National Institute for Child Health and Human Development also states that despite so many children, a high percentage of children having, reading below grade level requirements, 90 to 95% of children who have reading difficulties can still reach reasonably good reading goals as per grade level with the right kind of instruction and teaching. So there's a lot of hope that even if children do not have deficits in these areas, with the right kind of systematic training and instruction that is provided, a good number of them can still achieve reasonable levels of reading expertise. So phonics teaching and language instruction, especially in the early years of schooling, is very crucial for building these kind of reading skills and fluency in children. If you look at the Indian scenario, 10% of Indians do have reading difficulty, and there are a lot of children, especially being a vast country with a huge population. About 35 million children have some kind of learning difficulties, especially with a major major percentage of those children having problems with reading. But again, here, this is the silver lining that, using different kinds of teaching pedagogies, multisensory teaching, more structured teaching, incorporating phonics in the reading instruction program, all these have been found to be very, very effective in overcoming reading challenges to a large extent. So this underlines the importance of phonics and why it needs to be taught. So let us just listing out the different use of phonics and why it really helps in reading. What phonics does, it makes you more aware. It builds upon your phonemic awareness. That is the sound to symbol recognition. It helps you to concentrate and focus on a word using certain tangible strategies, which is, knowing the sound and using some of those strategies to build words. It makes you more aware of syllable structure in words. That is how the printed word also relates to the breakup of the sound units in words. It helps in building up your cognitive capacity, your reasoning capacity, because when you teach phonics and they begin to read, they begin to reason out. If, for example, if one word is written in a particular way and this is how you decode that word, another word in the same pattern can be read in a similar way. So a lot of cognitive and reasoning capacity building happens when you teach phonics. It also ultimately improves the overall reading skills and contributes towards more fluent reading. And when all these happens and when that translates into writing, phonics instruction also has a very good positive impact on spelling skills when the children write down the words that they've learned. So it contributes to better spelling skills as well. Now, to look at what are the unique challenges faced by children with special needs with regard to phonological awareness. Some of the most commonly seen challenges, especially in the early stages, are they have difficulty in learning and singing rhymes. So this is kind of a red flag indicator. If they're having difficulty even in just orally learning and singing rhymes, that could be an indicator of possible reading difficulties later on. Difficulty remembering letter shapes and sounds. So a lot of this is recognized when children enter school, especially in the kindergarten classes, when most of the other children are able to catch on the letters and associate the letters with the sounds that it produces. Some of these children may be having difficulty in remembering letter shapes and as well as the sounds that they correlate to. Confusion in similar looking letters or similar sounding words or sounds. So if we have already talked earlier about certain sounds which are very similar. For example, b and d. When you produce it, on the looks of it, it is very similar. It's mainly in the auditory that it is, the discrimination is there. It's a very thin discrimination, very fine discrimination. Same with the way you write those letters, pretty much the strokes they kind of look like mirror images of opposites of each other. So they're very similar looking. So some of these children do have difficulties in differentiating and discriminating between these kind of similar looking letters as well as similar sounding words or sounds. Challenges in phonemic awareness, that is, being able to recognize sound in words. So if you tell them a particular word, ask them what is the beginning sound that you hear or what is the ending sound in this particular word. They may be having difficulty in saying that, or they may say it incorrectly or may not be consistently saying it correctly. So again, that shows challenges in phonemic awareness. Difficulties with decoding words, that is being able to match the letters to the sounds and using sounds to actually sound the word out or decode what the word is based on the letter sound association. So all these are indicators of reading challenges, and these are some of the very commonly seen reading challenges that we see in children who have reading difficulties. To move on to the higher level of reading, some of them may have already acquired some bit of phonemic awareness and they may be doing some bit of phonic reading and sight word recognition. But, the advanced level of reading challenges that we see, and this is very common, especially as you go into middle school, high school, they may have developed some amount of reading skills, but still they make a lot of errors in their reading. Their rate of reading or the speed, the pace at which they read may be too slow or too halted, or they may be struggling to read even the very commonly used words, most highly frequently used words in the passages and words, they may not be reading it almost automatically. They may be haltedly reading those. For example, the word the, and it's such a common word, and even after seeing and being exposed to that word several times, some of these children, we find that even at that word, they will ponder over the word, they'll have to retell the word or rephrase the word, and then be able to recognize it. So each time that word comes up, even though it's a very commonly used word, they still have to either if it's a sounding out word, they have to still sound it out, or if it's a sight word, they still have to fall back on some recall strategy to recall what the word is. So meaning to say, it doesn't become very automatic. The automaticity in reading is affected. Unable to read and comprehend simultaneously. So these are two different processes. While we are decoding the words, either sounding it out or recognizing the whole words through sight, the same time we are trying to understand what the word is saying or what the word is saying in that particular sentence. So most of us, what we do is we read as well as the comprehension processing goes on simultaneously. Whereas in children with special needs, this is affected. Many a time when they're reading, they are only reading and they're not necessarily comprehending at the same time. Or if the reading part is taken away, if somebody reads it to them, then perhaps they can comprehend, or it can be both. So again, multi-processing, doing the simultaneous processing of both the reading part of it and the comprehension part of it becomes difficult. Difficulty answering questions based on the reading material. This is again very closely linked with the previous point that I said. If they are not able to read as well as comprehend simultaneously, obviously comprehension would be affected. So therefore, when you're asking them questions based on the reading material, they're not able to give appropriate answers or correct answers based on the reading material. Because what they've done is when they've read it, they've just just done the word recognition, word decoding part of it. They've not necessarily understood the crux of the text matter. So again, these are some of the very commonly seen reading challenges we see in children with special needs. Now, to add on to that, there are other challenges that compound these already mentioned reading difficulties. So we know that children with special needs, different kinds of special needs conditions, may have other emotional or behavioral difficulties. So if they have those kind of difficulties, what it leads to is, and if they have the reading difficulties as well, then they have a tendency to avoid reading. Some of them may have very high anxiety levels when they're asked to read. Sorry. Some of them become very frustrated because they're struggling a lot at every word that they have to read, and they get fatigued or exhausted uh, with just a little bit of reading. So if they are required to read even a small passage, by the time they read the first one or two sentences itself, they are totally exhausted because they've put in so much of effort, focus into reading those the initial two sentences. So even after they've mastered the basics of phonological awareness and all that, you still find even in children with who have moved into middle school, high school, reading fatigue is something very, very common in these children, especially when the content matter increases when they move into higher classes. And also because of all this, these children go through a lot of stress, and they're unable to deal with these kind of stressful situations by themselves. There are other difficulties which again go hand in hand with these areas. One is poor memory and attention. So if they have attention related difficulties, poor memory, and so on, that also affects. Also, all these things are very, very interrelated and interlinked. Because of poor memory, poor attention, poor sequential or logical reasoning abilities, which all are affected because of reading and its other comorbid situations that you find in children with special needs. They also can affect their everyday skills, such as getting ready for school, for example, packing up their bags for the school, or getting their things ready for their next project in school, or planning on how to go about doing a particular project and so on. So a lot of their skills that they perform, activities that they have to perform as part of their everyday school as well as home environment may also get affected because of this. And ultimately, with all this, what it has its repercussions in social interaction. When they find that they're not able to keep up with their peer group, they do. There are chances that they may get become shy or withdrawn, or they may have a learned helplessness kind of feeling, or the other way around. Sometimes they tend to go overboard and misbehave so that they can get out of these difficult situations. And that again interferes with peer group interaction and their skills of making friends and staying maintaining friendships. So all these things are interrelated, and therefore it becomes extremely important why we have to think of all these different factors when we deal with reading challenges. So what do we do as, the role of educators, parents, anybody at all working with kids when it comes to addressing these difficulties is try and identify the early signs. And the key is act early, act as early as possible. Do not ever think that, okay, if there is if the child is lagging behind a bit now, let's wait, the child will catch up automatically. If the child is lagging behind, obviously there is some reason that is contributing to it. So find what that reason is, and or even if the reason is not evident at that moment, at least give the right kind of stimulation and the right kind of intervention that is necessary for the child to catch up, rather than waiting until the lag or the deficit widens. So acting early as possible is very, very important. Even if the child appears to be very smart in all the other areas, and do not let reading difficulties go as okay, they will catch it up with age, because many of the children who do have reading difficulties do not outgrow it in a normal manner. They do need some kind of stimulation or support or intervention for them to come out of it, or to help them get on track and catch up with their peer group. So what are the different kinds of strategies and techniques that we have to look at when we talk about building reading fluency? Two wide areas, address the different kinds of diversities of the different kinds of learning styles, learning modalities you have through multisensory activities. And then, of course, supplement it and complement it using customized worksheets. So two broad areas where in a general classroom, in an inclusive classroom, you can kind of hit out at and reach out to children who have diverse learning needs. So when we talk about the multisensory or the multi-learning modality methods, basically four kinds that we talk about. One is the visual, that is basically they learn more through seeing. Oral, they learn more through hearing. Kinesthetic or tactile, which is more through touch and through writing, through doing. And then there's the read and write part of it, where you can kind of bring in all the other three elements into the reading and writing part of it as well. So here, more of the reading writing modality is used. This is more an offshoot of after they, once they pick up on the reading writing skills. So it is important to identify the learning styles in children. So when it is visual, normally you find that they tend to talk fast, and they try to use words and phrases which kind of are very descriptive visually. They benefit a lot from using pictures, from models, from drawing and so on. So these are some of the activities that you can think of when you think of visual learners. When it comes to oral learners, they tend to talk more, use verbalization. So they may talk a bit slowly, but they may be, they are able to effectively put across their ideas more through the verbal method. And they tend to listen better. They tend to think in a very logical, step-by-step fashion. And instead of giving a written material to them, they prefer hearing an explanation, an audio explanation. And they tend to rely heavily on listening and speaking skills to learn. When it comes to kinesthetic or tactile learners, they are generally very slow in talking. They are slow to decide upon what to do. Usually they engage most of their senses in learning, and they like to do hands-on activities. So it's more like a do, and solve activities. They learn a lot through trial and error. Many of these children are also, many of their learning takes place when their body is moving. There is fine motor or gross motor skills involved when they are doing their learning activity. Reading and writing. Many these children prefer if a written text is given rather than an oral explanation, and they are comfortable when the text is provided as an input source, as an information source, as well as they're comfortable giving out their performance also in the form of writing. And basically these children do enjoy reading and writing. And again, you might find different children with special needs issues go through all of these, or through different stages of these, depending on their age, the level of severity of their condition, and so on. So it depends on what the child's level is at a particular given moment, what the strengths are, what the challenges are, based on which you need to utilize the more stronger modality in more of the learning activities, but do not ignore the other learning modalities, because building up on all the other areas will eventually lead to more holistic learning. So what are some of the activities that we can think of? One is reading out loud. So it can be we can read out to the children, and children can also read out to each other. So again, reading out aloud is a good way of learning how to read. Listening to good models of reading really helps in developing better reading skills. Reading to self, so being able to read by oneself. And sometimes you can get the child to read to themselves, and get a feedback. So if they have their headphones on, they can listen to their own reading. Sometimes you can also have recorded versions of their reading, and they can listen to it, so that it helps them to correct their errors, if any. So listening, reading to self, and again using different kinds of modalities here. Word building. Word building is again putting the letter sounds or the different sounds that the letters stand for, to join them together or pull them apart, etc. To build the words and take them apart. a kinesthetic tactile way of learning. One is, writing in sand or writing in salt, etc., because again that provides the hands-on activity. The fine motor activity is given, so it triggers their kinesthetic learning. uh, the act of blending, again putting the sounds together, and many of these children, if they have difficulties with blending, they may need some visual to know where to start and how to go through the word and how to end the word. So if you look at the picture here, uh, they've used the traffic signal lights, the green, the yellow, and the red, to show where to start. So green is for the start, you go, you move on, and then you end with the ending sound. Again, the arrow also gives an indicator of where to start from and where to end the word. The pictures in that, actually, the clue pictures, the quer sound is shown with the picture of a queen. So quer, that gives an indication of what sound it is. Um, the I, the clock. So the ending sound is k, which is the clock sound. So all these, actually give an indication of how to read the word. So different things are here. Plus, if the person is, or the child is being asked to move their finger along, that again provides a nice tactile kinesthetic mode. Again, it involves, and when they're saying it aloud, again the oral is taken care of. So you can use this one particular picture itself, this method, for touching upon all the different modalities. Another way of doing it is read the word, build it, and then write it. So initially you just put your finger and read the word, and then you can build it either by using a Play-Doh, or you can use finger paints, or you can put letter cutouts and build the word. And then you can come down to the more the task of writing the word. So they begin to connect all the three, by reading, the building of the word, as well as writing the word. Again, read and build activity, where you can use either the letter cutouts in the form of foam letters, plastic letters, wooden letters, whatever. You can use Play-Doh, you can even use finger paints, or writing on foam, shaving foam, for example, where you can trace these things. So all these read and build activities can be used. And then it is not just important to teach words or letter sounds and how to combine them, but use those words in relevant sentences. Only then the application comes. So and then the meaning of the word becomes more apparent. Because if you're teaching something isolated just as a word, it doesn't have any meaning just by itself. So you have to learn how to associate it with pictures, how to associate, then move from the letter to word, then to the sentence part of it. This helps in building up comprehension. When comprehension improves, learning becomes more meaningful, and therefore you're hitting it out not just at decoding the words, but also using it and applying it and seeing that it makes sense. It conveys a certain kind of meaning. So always remember, do not teach words in isolation. They have to be moved on to context. That is, use the context of a sentence or a picture, or an action that they perform, and convert that word into a sentence form. Get in shape activity. Again, some of the children, especially those who learn better through the whole word approach, the shape of how the words are, that kind of helps them to understand, recognize, and retain words better. So this is again another very visual form of learning. This can help, and children can also trace the edges of these shapes, which helps them to identify the words better. Using of a word wall, again, this is a must in all the classrooms, especially the primary level classrooms. Um, the middle and high school can also have word walls, but they'll be more content based. But at least in the early reading years, the common words, the most high frequently used words, have to be displayed on the word wall so that the children are exposed to it at all times. They can always refer back to it. You can also teach words through rhymes. So here, if you look at the left-hand side picture, the word is look, and there is a little rhyme based on the word look, and they have to say the rhyme, listen to the rhyme, sing the rhyme, and then identify the word so they can circle the word. And if you look at the word look has also been shown in a visual manner, which actually gives out the meaning of what the word look is. The two eyes in the middle actually gives that out. So again, teaching through the oral or through hearing, auditory learners find this useful. Hopscotch, using the tactile kinesthetic ways of learning. So, for children who need to move around and learn through movement, again, you can use things like this. Instead of even writing the words down, you can actually put in flashcards into the hopscotch, blank hopscotch squares. So that gives you the freedom of using different kinds of words. So you don't have to be limited by whatever the words that have been written. So again, use different kinds of ways to hit out at multisensorial learning. And if you do multisensorial learning, it provides more holistic learning experiences, which results in better learning. Visual flashcards. Again, here, if you look at how the words are, the words have been picturized in a manner which kind of gives the meaning of the word out. So that makes more sense to the child, and they're able to relate to that word better. So recognize the word. After a while, you can slowly fade off the pictures, and then they'll begin to recognize the word itself. So, for example, if you look at the word grow, the picture shows the plant growing. So that gives an indication of what the meaning of the word is as well. So again, the visual meaning that the word is conveying helps the child to remember the word better. So again, visualizing the words through pictorial means like this also helps. You can also get children to act this out. So for example, when they read the word eat, what they've seen on the flashcard, they can actually role play it and act it out. So that will also give a kinesthetic mode of learning. So what we use, some of the materials that we can use is, obviously we start off with the letters and letter sound association. So we have to connect, have a letter sound association chart, and try to use clue pictures, which always will trigger that letter association. So, when you start with alphabet phonics, try to always link it to one particular picture. You can introduce, when you're in detail dealing with one letter at a time, you can give different kinds of vocabulary with starting with the same letter, but the clue, the initial trigger should be with one. And when you constantly rehearse it and revise these letter sound association, also try to keep one constant letter with a one constant picture, because that association then helps the child, even when they're reading words, if they get stuck at a word, you can always say, okay, b as in ball, if ball was your, or balloon, whichever was your clue picture. So you can always try and connect it to the clue pictures that the children have been introduced to. So that's why it's always, have one clue picture which will form a hook that the child can go back to when they're trying to recollect sounds. Word building can also be done through the use of flip charts. Flip charts are very useful because you can, you can change the beginning parts, you can change the middle parts, you can change the ending parts, and you can do different kinds of phonemic manipulation and get the child to develop better phonemic awareness, phonic manipulation skills. Phonic manipulation skills are also a big part of learning to decode and code words, and also being able to recognize, similarities and contrasts in words. So all the phonological awareness skills that we talked of, a good part of it can also be done through flip charts. We can also use alphabet, the actual letter cutouts or foam letters or plastic letters, which can actually be moved to build words. So normally what I do is, have the children arrange the A to Z on their desk, and then I ask them to bring down the, if I say a word, I ask them to bring down the initial sound letter, the middle sound letter, and then the end sound letter. So if I'm say asking them to sound the word bat, build the word bat. So I ask them from the ABC that they've laid out, bring out the B, A, and T, and then put them together to read the word. So again, this can be done as a kinesthetic tactile activity. It can also be done as a visual auditory activity. So word building through letter cutouts, picture reading. So, again, using a lot of pictures, picture-based books with minimal text initially to start off with. So that really helps because the pictures provide clues to what you're reading. So even if they get stuck at a word, you can ask them to, you can use the pictures as clues for them to kind of guess the word, make an educated guess of what the word is. Also books which have pop-ups, where you can lift flaps and look underneath, or pop-up books. These all add to the to engaging the student more effectively. So having good picture books with pop-up books or flap lifting books, or things where the books you can do some kinesthetic activity with the books also help, especially in the early years. These really are very good for maintaining and engaging the child's interest in the books. So a lot of we've looked at a lot of the different kinds of activities that can be used, and how multisensory ways can actually build better reading skills. So when we coming down to narrowing down our focus into how to teach children with special needs to learn how to read. So start from learning to read. The basic level includes start with alphabet phonics. And when we talk about alphabet phonics, it includes, especially in English, it includes the consonants and the vowels. And in English, there are two kinds of vowel sounds, but usually when we start with alphabet phonics, we go with the short vowels. So the short vowel sounds and the phonics, the consonant sounds are what we start off first. And then once they get that, we move on to phonetic decoding. That is blending and segmenting, and we use CVC words. CVC means consonant, vowel, consonant words. So the first one, consonant, could be like a T. The vowel in the middle could be an A. The consonant at the end could be a P. So T, A, P, tap. So this is an example of a CVC word. 3-letter words which are with the vowel in between. So phonetic decoding usually starts with, we try with CVC words first, and along with introducing the phonetic decoding, some sight words which may or may not be phonetically decodable. Because some of the sight words, especially in the English language, are not necessarily those that can be sounded out. They just have to be learnt almost by repeated exposure, just by looking and saying the word, almost like memorizing the word, either through its shape, through its different practice and exposure to the words. So sight words and a good mix of sight words and CVC words are necessary for initial reading fluency, because only when you combine some of the sight words with phonetic words, you can make a sentence. In the previous slide, when I talked about I have a map, I is a sight word, have is a sight word, A is a sight word, whereas map is a phonetically decodable word. So when you have taught that, introduce some of the early sight words also, so that you can combine the sight words as well as the phonetic words, and then create a sentence. So again, that adds on to touching upon the comprehension part of it, the usage of the words, the applicability of where the words should come in the sentence, and so on. So the sentence structure itself is introduced. It enhances the vocabulary of the children as well. So when you're teaching them so many different words and how to use it, how to read it, understand it, and write it, then definitely vocabulary is increased. So when we talk about the phonics part of it, what is it that we are looking at? Two major areas that we are looking at. One is called blending and the other is called segmenting. Blending, as the word suggests, it is when we put the individual letter sounds together. We join the sounds together in the sequence that it is given in the word, and sound the word out. So generally what we call as sounding out the word. That is called blending, putting the individual sounds together to form to say the word. Segmenting is the opposite of that. Segmenting is once you hear the word, to be able to break it down into its individual sounds. And this usually helps when you have to do, when you have to do phonemic manipulation, for example. You need to be able to segment. When you're trying to write the word down or trying to spell the word, segmenting is necessary. So basically, being able to read and write the word. So together, these two core skills form the basis of teaching phonics. So some of the sample worksheets I'll go through, where we can have a look at what are the different kinds of activities that we can give. One is you can match the capital letter to the small letter, the lowercase letter, the uppercase and lowercase matching, or you can give the uppercase and the lowercase they have to write. You can use these, you can also give missing letters as, to recognize letters in sequence. You can also do circle the matching letter. So different kinds of activities that can be done. And I'm sure as educators, many of you have already been exposed to a lot of these letter identification kind of worksheets. There can also be letter sound association worksheets as well. Again, when we are talking about phonics, it is associating the letter to the sound. And here, this is where, again, building up vocabulary, all these things go hand in hand. So using pictures help. So we can have worksheets initially where the beginning sound is all the same. So for example, if you look at the middle worksheet, beginning sound of the letter C. So all the k sound that is given, and everywhere the k is at the beginning of the letter of the word. So they have to say the word and then identify the beginning sound and write it. If it goes a bit more to the difficult part of it, you can also, once they learn a few of the letter sounds, then you can give different kinds of letter sounds that have already been introduced. And they have to say each of the picture name and then identify what letter will make that particular sound and bring that out and then choose the correct letter that makes that particular sound and write it down. So again, different ways of doing it, just some sample worksheets. The focus here basically is on the beginning sound of the word. So here we are talking of the onset, and the beginning sound is being identified and translated into the letter. Again, using a lot of these pictures help. You can also do hands-on activities with these. You can actually have these pictures as picture cards, and you can give, maybe different 2 or 3 letters and ask them to place it. So instead of using it on a worksheet, you can also do the same thing as a kinesthetic activity. For example, you can give maybe 2 or 3 letters, write it on the board, and then you can give them picture cards, and each one has to say the name of the picture and then come and put the picture under the correct letter. So again, the same activity can be done even in a kinesthetic tactile manner. You can also do it as a reading writing activity on a worksheet. Now we talked about the beginning sound worksheets. Now this is the ending sound worksheets. So again, being able to recognize what sound comes at the end. So this is again a slightly more advanced skill as compared to the beginning sounds. Initially, we start with beginning sounds, then we move on to the ending sounds. These are the more commonly followed patterns. And then again, you can, initially you can give a worksheet which has the same ending sound for all the pictures, and then you can mix them up. As they learn more ending sounds, you can kind of mix them up, and then you can give them choices. Similar to what we did in the beginning, you can do with the ending also. And you can also convert these into hands-on kinesthetic activities. And then we come to once we get this, then we can come on to the CVC worksheets, where now the middle sound is also important. So different ways of doing it. Here, if you look at the right-hand side, the farthest on the right-hand side worksheet, you find that they have to say the word, identify it with the picture, say the word, and then identify what is the vowel sound that goes in between. And with most children who have reading difficulties, the vowel sounds are usually the hardest to get, because many of the vowel sounds require very fine discrimination of sounds. So again, these have to be taught. And some of the ways I do it is, sometimes with many children who have fine auditory discrimination issues, you need to add a visual, or you need to add a kinesthetic element to it. So sometimes, I add a kinesthetic element to it, or a visual element to it, so that they recognize what letter needs to go in there. So you can, give a thing like saying ah, for, just pull your chin down. Ah comes, that's the ah sound. So later on, if the child is confused, you can just show the chin down action, and that will be a cue for the child to do it. And even when the children add on this element, the tactile element, along with sounding it out, it helps them to learn better because it's using multisensory modality. Similarly, you can do for other vowel sounds as well. You can also work on the shape of the letters. So here, if you look at the middle part, the worksheet which is given in the middle, they have to read the word, and then they have to write the word. Again, the word is given in a particular shape. So, to give that whole word look, the shape of the word adds on to the understanding or the recognition of the word. And then, of course, to add to the vocabulary or the comprehension of the word, you can give the picture, where they can either circle the picture or color it or whatever, which will help them to associate that with a certain meaning. And then you can also give, if you look at the left hand corner, the worksheet given there, here the discrimination is more finer. Two very similar words are given. So they have to look at the picture, name the picture, then decode the word really carefully to find out which is the word that matches with the picture and which does not match. So I usually tell them color the word or circle the word and then cross out the other word. And it is important, especially when you teach younger kids and children with special needs, they need to know what is and what is not. So, for example, if you look at the left-hand side worksheet, let me look at the word lip, the first picture. Okay, the word lip and lid is given. Once they sound it out, they say the word out, they sound it out. And then if they say, okay, lip is the correct word, they circle or color the word and then cross out the other word, lid, so that they know that does not belong to the picture. So usually trying to do that really helps because when children need to know that this is the correct word, they also need to know which is not the correct word. So eliminating, what is not the correct word is also important. So again, this is a precursor of a more advanced reading skill, which we call skimming and scanning and eliminating. So when we skim and scan, what happens is we go through the word, we scan the word, and then we take what is necessary and we eliminate what is not necessary. And this is a very important skill, as further in the higher levels of reading as well. So start teaching those kind of processing skills when you even teach them simple CVC words like this. So being able to take the word that is necessary and eliminate. So use a crossing out technique if there are options given. And in the same way, also when you do the middle worksheet, for example, 3 pictures are given for the word hat. So circle the correct picture and cross out the pictures which are incorrect and which do not go with the word. So always when there is an option given, exercise the option and eliminate the wrong options. Choose the correct option and eliminate the wrong option. Again, a very important cognitive processing skill that children need and which will lay the foundation for better surveying, skimming and scanning skills later on when they come into higher level reading. So you start very young itself with these kind of skills. Another example of a worksheet, again here, left-hand side, you see a word search. Picture clues are given, and then they have to find those words. So initially, you can get them to sound the word out, maybe write the word, and then find the word in the word search. And then here again in this worksheet, they've given the shape of the letter. So again, that is an added element which helps them to read, write, recognize, and retain the words better. The right-hand side, another sample worksheet is shown where there's a, the letters are in a jumble and it's they have to unscramble the letters and put them in the correct way. And here again, the shape is provided to give the children a clue on what it is. The picture also gives them a clue on what the word is. And many of the children with special needs may have difficulty with this. And unscrambling is a very, very difficult process with a lot of children with special needs. And initially, you may have to use kinesthetic, actual letter tiles or letter cutouts, foam letters, for them to move it around. So they can move it around and then set it right and then write it in the worksheet. So many of them may actually need to use these kind of added hands-on activities to help them do the reading writing activity that is provided in the worksheet. Another sample here again, the word, the beginning sounds are given, and then they have to write the rest of the word by saying the name of the picture. So different ways of doing it. Crossword puzzle, that is another way of again, picture puzzle is given in the form of a crossword puzzle. So they have to look at each picture and fill in the letters, say the picture name, and then fill in the letters, and then make up the crossword puzzle. So again, different samples of how you can do it. So use various kinds of worksheets when you work with children. Because if you do the same kind of worksheet, what happens is they get just tuned to that. And then when different ways of responding are given, that they are unable to transfer that learning. So try and use different kinds of activities even when you're doing the worksheets. So vary the different kinds of activities, whether you do it multisensorily or through worksheets, so that they get an exposure of thinking in different ways to learning and reading these words. Then coming on to sight words. Phonics, CVC, we've talked about how to go about the initial part of it. Now to coming on to sight word worksheets. Sight words are usually taught through flashcards, very popular method of teaching, because many of these words are not necessarily soundable. So they need to be recognized by the shape of the letter, by the usage, and so on. So again, a lot of flashcards can be used. You can use just word flashcards, or you can use flashcards with a picture that relates to the word, or you can even have flashcards which have the word as well as the usage of the word in the sentence. And you can prompt the children to use these words in different kinds of sentences. Do it as an oral activity initially, and then move it on to writing. So again, just like we talked about in the phonics part of it, you can have different kinds of variety of worksheets where you can use sight words as word searches. The words are given, they have to find the word and then write it down. You can ask, you can also give sight word worksheets again as word shapes, especially with sight words. Shapes play a very important part because that helps them to identify the word, especially if they're not phonetically decodable. You can also give ABC order or alphabetizing the words. So they're not only rehearsing their ABC, the alphabetical order, they're also, doing different they're doing the same words, but in different ways. So even when you're doing one particular set of words, you can give all these different kinds of activities so that they don't have to just write the same word, say 10 times or 5 times, which is very monotonous. So rather than giving, repetitive writing, which appears, which becomes very monotonous and boring and stops engaging the child, use different kinds of activities so that it keeps the interest of the child up. And also along the way, there are, different kinds of cognitive processes are being stimulated through the different kinds of activities that you do. And therefore, they learn not only to recognize the word in one particular format, but wherever you give the word, they're able to recognize it. So again, crossword puzzle, like we used in the phonics, same thing can be done with sight words also. Here again, sight words is given. You have to read the, here there is a combination of the, the phonetic word as well as the sight word. And you see, if you look at the left-hand side worksheet, you will see that it is repetitive sentences. I see is repeated. So probably the sight words that have been introduced are I, see, and and therefore, and the at words were the phonetic pattern that was being introduced in the class. So the teacher has combined the two and put the phonetic words and the sight words to develop a certain kind of reading fluency. And again, that can be the color words are given, so the children can be read it, and then you can ask the children to color the pictures, and therefore after coloring the pictures, then they can read the word even better, the sentence even better. And then they also realize that the written word or the read sentence relates to the picture. So it again builds upon the comprehension, the vocabulary, and so on. Same thing on the right hand side, there are pictures given where some action is happening, and there are sentences which include sight words as well as CVC words. So a combination of the sight words that are introduced and the CVC phonetic words that are the children have to use those skills, read it, and then identify the picture that goes with it. They can do a cut and paste activity. They can also do a drawing activity. I usually get my children to draw a lot of stick, it doesn't have to be very elaborate drawing. It can even be a very simple, shape based stick figure kind of drawing also, where children can actually show that they comprehend. Getting children to draw relating to the sentences, after reading the sentences, and that also triggers a kind of good thinking process and visualization and forming visual images and imagination in children. So again, cutting and pasting activities becomes hands-on and tactile. Getting them to draw also keeps them more engaged, and it helps them to learn how to draw and illustrate. And this helps because later on, when they are doing comprehension exercises, even if they are limited by their written abilities in writing comprehension answers, you can give them additional options such as write and draw the answer. So even if they can't write complete sentences, they can only do one word comprehension answers, they can still draw to illustrate and add on to demonstrate their comprehension in addition to just writing those one word answers. So again, teaching children how to draw really helps in a lot of better comprehension, better student engagement, and better multisensory learning. And that helps build fluency and comprehension skills. Another word here again, there's a word search and pictures relating to sentences. So a combination of how phonetic words and sight words can be introduced. And then once you do these from the sentence, it moves on to a little bit more difficult area, which is reading comprehension. And when it moves into more reading comprehension, you can have, depending on what the reading level of the children are, you create a story, or you find a story that relates to those words that you have introduced. And then from that as a storyline, and then they can have comprehension questions based on that. And initially it can be just multiple choice, where they just have to circle the answer and write one word answers. And slowly it can move on to, sentence answers bit by bit. So coming to different kinds of case scenarios that you may experience when we, when we deal with different kinds of children. I'm just going to, give you some case scenarios and see how we can go about solving the situations in these children. Case scenario 1 is Shilpa is a girl. She's in upper kindergarten or KG2. She gets confused between the letters B and D. So how can we help her? Can you give some suggestions on what can be done to help her? So while you're giving suggestions, I would like you to think about all that we've discussed in the workshop so far, about the different kinds of multisensorial activities and so on, and why we are using these kind of different kinds of activities to help her out. So I would like the participants to please come forth and give their suggestions on, what can be done.
So we have received few suggestions from our participants in the chat box. Most of them tend to say using model clay, using sand or salt writing, air writing, using play words through phonics, VAKT strategies, shape writing, sand tracing, tactile methods, shape-based letter recognition, like using models, show picture differences. It's going on very fast. Curves, recognition through using kinesthetic ways, air writing, flashcards, sound writing, B&D stories, hand gestures.
Okay. Yes, a lot of these, the suggestions that you've given are really good. Yes, we have to use, one thing we have to understand is when children have difficulties with similar looking letters, quite often it is a visual processing difficulty. See, visually they are not able to differentiate between the two letters. So introduce the auditory part of it. Also introduce kinesthetic and tactile part. So rightly, as you all said, using sand or letter writing, Play-Doh, using letter shape cutouts. One of the things I also use is, have a, like you said, write a big air writing. While they do the air writing, you can also have a picture behind the B, like a bat and a ball, and both begin with the B sound, which is the sound for B. So a bat and a ball make a B. So drawing a bat with like a stick and then a ball with a circle makes a B. So again, these kind of different strategies help the child in recognizing. Same with drum. You can have a drumstick and a drum, or a drummer and a drum, which will give the shape of a D. Some children may need that kind of a thing. For some children, what I do is, write the word bed, and have the bedstead. So the B comes at the beginning and then D comes at the end. So what happens is the first letter in ABC order, the first one is B and then the D. So having the form of a bed and with the B and D written, that kind of a visual imagery helps. Another way of doing it is also, putting up the thumbs, the thumbs up method, where hold the thumbs facing your, the four fingers facing yourself. And if you look at the left hand, the first hand, we read from left to right. So the left hand, it's B, which is the first letter which comes in the alphabet order. And then the right hand shows the D shape. So again, that is another way of doing it. I also use something called a desk card, which is like a letter line that can be placed on the this thing. So when the child is confused, ask them to go back to the letter line and trace over the letter or look at the letter before they write, especially if they're doing a worksheet and they're confused. Caution them that when it comes to B and D or whichever letter they're having trouble with, they need to first check before they write. So give them an option of going looking at the desk card, or even if you have wall charts, the alphabet charts, looking at that and before they write, especially the ones that they confuse themselves. Making them aware of which letters they're having difficulty with is also. So communicate with the child that, okay, you have a difficulty with this letter and this letter. So whenever you need to write these letters, or whenever you need to read them, always check with the letter line, or so do that checking or do whichever modality they've been familiarized with to so that they have a chance of errorless reading and writing. And with time, you find that desk card, I know, for example, many of them, they use that intensively in the early years, but as they get more and more familiar, then they begin to outgrow that. Similarly, with the tactile and, the other visuals that we have told, the intention is to give them all the modalities initially, and then as they move on, as they get more comfortable, they can be weaned off that. Some children, however, may not be totally weaned off, which is why we need to always have these desk cards or anchor charts, so that, I've had children who even in, say, middle school still suddenly get stumped, and they're kind of having difficulty. So it's better that they have a letter line or an anchor chart somewhere on the wall where they can quickly look through, and then not, when they put it down on paper, they have actually access something, and then they have a greater chance of writing the correct thing down. So that was case 1 scenario. So let's go to the case 2 scenario. This is about David, who is in grade 1. and he has difficulty with short vowel sounds. So the difference are A, E, I, O, U. These are the short vowels, and the short vowel sounds. The A says A as in apple. The E says E as in elephant. The I says ink, I as in ink. The U says, the O says orange, O as in orange. And the U says umbrella, A as in umbrella. So these are the clue pictures or the clue words you may use, or you may use certain others, but basically relating to the same sounds. So if this child has difficulty with the short vowel sounds, how can we help this child? I would like the participants to come up with suggestions, please.
We have a quite number of suggestions coming in, ma'am. So using visual cards to teach vowels, reading out loud, focus on pronunciation, vowels stripped with pictures, show them the mouth with reading, letter with picture cards, 5 fingers, using rhymes, poems, rhymes, showing pictures, phonic songs, focused letter sounds, picture card sorting, cut and paste pictures, words with flashcards, loose letters and object association, songs with drama, phonic sing with action using different words through examples, make them read out loud, picture songs, mouth exercises. Yeah, a repetition of most of this. Sounds with clap.
Yeah, it's a very, very exhaustive list, and I'm happy that the people have come out with so many different things. Again, to remember that short vowel sounds are difficult with for some children. For a lot of children, actually, they do have difficulties with these sounds, mainly because the sounds sound very, very similar. So the fine discrimination is what needs to be done. So a lot of auditory training on the letter sound association has to happen. As rightly put by the participants, a lot of songs, rhymes, saying the word out loud, reading out loud again. And when you have trouble with short vowel sounds, usually get to exaggerate this that particular sound a little bit more when you're reading. When you're saying cat, sick, at. So, you stress a little bit on that particular vowel sound. And as I said during the workshop also, you can add a kinesthetic element also to it. So, I normally use something as, say, a for the A, so chin down. If it's E, for the E sound, which is the elephant sound, I say so it goes like the mouth goes, in two directions. So it goes like in a straight line. So that helps to understand, how it is done. And then I because it is the straight line, I say and then as in orange, it's much more easier because you can just show an and then again, which is a bit confusing because children can get it confused with the A. So usually because U is with the sound of is spelled with the U, I usually do that. It gives the shape of a U, so around the face. So again, little things like these. When you add on these kind of things, what happens is the children are also engaged actively. There's more active student participation. It also gives them a tool on which to go, and later on you can also use these as cues. So I have seen, once you've trained the children in these things, if they get to a particular word, the moment they see the, say for example, they see the word bug and the U is there, they say b, and they're not sure of the sound, but then they see the U and they do that, and then they get that. It helps them in recollecting, okay, this was the sound, as in umbrella. Or sometimes you have to relate it to the clue picture that you've given. See, this is as in umbrella. So when you say that, then they begin to associate. So you have to give them different kinds of ways, and some of the ways that I've done and which I found to be pretty successful is these, not to mention all of the things that the participants mentioned, equally brilliant in, doing so many different kinds of ways and activities work. And with certain kids, certain strategies work the best. As you work with the children, you would realize that, this particular child probably needs a desk card. whereas the a kinesthetic child probably needs the hand movements and so on. So I try and I do give the different kinds of activities, but I try to wean them off that, because all the time you cannot always have a stand writing or these kind of things. So desk writing, for example. So after moving out from the stand writing, I ask them to write it on the desk and then write it on the paper. So again, gives them a tactile, but you don't need anything other than your finger to write on the desk. So minimizing the tools that are required. So again, that is one way why I use the body parts itself for them to learn this. So also, they can write these letters nice and big on the floor, and they can walk through it. Or you can even have, children. I've seen teachers use like a little ball and a stick where they are guiding the ball through the shape of the letter. So again, doing that kind of movement, or even walking on that letter helps. So because that triggers their kinesthetic and tactile memory. So using different kinds of things like this actually help with many of these kind of issues. So we come to an end of today's workshop. What we have actually learned gained from this workshop is, phonological activities, awareness activities are crucial for building and promoting better reading skills. A combination of phonics and sight word instruction together, hand in hand, helps to improve reading fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary development. And therefore, they need to go hand in hand, particularly when you're teaching English, because in English, not every word is phonetically decodable. So you need to use a healthy combination of phonics and sight words. And of course, you need to use it in context, in sentence form, in story form, etc., so that it improves comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary development. Use multisensory or multi-modality activities so that it helps in better acquisition, better retention, recall, when you actually have to do instruction through reading. So multimodality definitely provides for more holistic learning, and therefore solves the acquisition, maintenance, and generalization problem that we normally see in children who have challenges. So with that, we come to an end of this workshop. We can take the question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am. We had a lot to learn from you. Very, very practical and hands-on session today. I'm sure our participants also enjoyed today's session. If you've enjoyed today's session, put in an S in the comment box. And for all of you who are looking out, how is that you can access all the recording of today's session and also the materials for today's session. I'm just quickly going to take you all through that. Ma'am, if you could stop sharing for a minute. Yes. So Ability has come up with the events takeaway page. So for all the events that you're attending, the slides, the document, the resources, and the recording of the workshops would be available at one place here. The link for it is being shared right now in the chat box. Do save the link. Not only that, you'll also receive a mail with the recording, also with the resources. Do check that out so that you will be able to refer to the recording at your convenience. And also, if you scroll down on this page, you'll find all our upcoming events on the different modules which you can register. We have very, very limited seats that are available for you. So do book your slots and register yourself today. If you have benefited from our event today, do share the gratitude by sharing it with any teacher or anyone in your community about the workshop and the resources so that more information is spread to build awareness far and wide across to help millions of children with special needs. And the resources link is also being shared right now in the chat box for you all to access it. Not only that, I'll orient you all about the upcoming workshops. We have the next workshop on strategies and techniques to improve academic outcomes of children with ADHD, which will be happening on the 11th of January, which will be conducted by Ms. Shivani Vadwa at 4:30 p.m. Indian time, 6 p.m. Indonesian time, and 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Followed by, we'll have a session exclusively on blending, segmenting, and speaking skills to enhance reading fluency, which would be conducted by Madam Geetha Gopi N on the 20th of January 2022 at 4:30 p.m. Indian time, 6 p.m. Indonesian time, 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do share the care and share the resource with anyone who you think would benefit from it. And also don't forget to register yourself and book your slots today. Now, we can begin with the Q&A session for today, ma'am. Are you ready to take the first question?
Yes, please.
So the first question is from Ms. Zantul, Annabelle, and also Ms. Deepa, who wants to know children with special needs have difficulty in remembering the sound and symbol association. Even after teaching them multiple times, they tend to forget it. So what are certain things that special educators or teachers can keep in mind to support children?
Usually we find it's if you use multisensorial methods consistently, they would get it eventually. Some children take more time. But having said that, it depends on if the child has, say, intellectual disability, for example. So then, I do find if you start them very early on, they pick up some bit of phonics, but sometimes retention becomes difficult for them. So in those children, then we should, if after several, even giving them considerable time, they're still not able to pick up, then we would have to probably go more into functional kind of reading in those cases. But again, for functional reading also, it helps if they have some bit of phonemic awareness. So, then we take up words which are most useful for them in the environment. So they may not be able to, in such cases, they may not be able to read any word given to them and probably read a story, etc. But the child may be having, still some life skill based reading would be necessary. So like, for example, identifying the road signs, or, if they go to a public place, being able to identify the word toilet, for example. So some of those kind of functional reading words will have to be introduced. And quite often, many of these, again, phonemic awareness and sight word recognition strategies are used to introduce those kind of words. But with a lot of the children, especially children who have learning disability, for example, or children with even autism, who are on the autism spectrum, many of them do take up improve a lot in their reading skills if you follow the phonics and sight word approach.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
With children who have limited intellectual deficits, yes, it takes a much, much longer time. And some of these children may not totally take on to phonics. So again, it is very important to understand as we work with the children, how much they're able to pick up. What happens is, with children who have intellectual disability, sometimes they are able to pick up the 3-letter, the CVC words. But the moment it comes to 4-letter words, the phonic rules start coming in then. And then they are not able to, kind of grasp those rules and apply those rules. Then it starts becoming more complicated. So in those cases, it is better that you limit their reading, introduce words which they will need more in their everyday life. So which will become part of their active using vocabulary. So the usage vocabulary, the functional part of reading needs to be focused on.
So focusing on the functional reading is the key. As we're talking about the rules, next we have a question from Ms. Kriti, who wants to know how to teach sight words that do not go with the rules. For example, words like floor, door, etc. Is there any specific technique to do it, ma'am?
Words like floor and door actually do come in phonics. It comes in under diphthongs, and odd words. Or there are, what we usually do is we follow word patterns and word families, for example. So, you can find words which have a common trait. So floor, door, for example, and, if there are other words that go with the same pattern, with the same rule, then you can, put those as one word family and then teach that. So teaching word patterns and word families are also part of phonic instruction, which will be dealt with in more detail in the forthcoming workshop.
Sure, ma'am. Word families is the key word here. Next, we have a question from Miss Shailaja and Miss Grace, who wants to know what should be the sequencing of the sight words, especially for the nursery classes. Is there any sequence that we have to adopt to teach children the sight words?
Normally there are certain sight word lists which are very popularly used around the world. One is the Dolch sight word list. Another one is Fry's sight word list. Different countries, both these are US based. There are also some UK based ones. So it depends on what sight word list your curriculum is following. That is one thing, and many of these are divided into grade levels also. If you go on check up, if you Google it, you will get like the pre-primer word list or the primer word list, the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 word list. Most of the sight word lists are graded according to grade levels, what needs to be covered in each, and you can teach according to that. Alternatively, you can also go according to what your curriculum textbooks are focusing on. So most of the curriculum textbooks will have certain words, but they'll also have stories that go with these. Okay, so it may not exactly be in the same order as the sight word list that is, published as per grade level. There are conflicting different viewpoints on how to teach sight words. Some people like to go purely according to grade level. Personally speaking, what I find is when you go purely according to the grade level list of sight words given, sometimes you're not able to put them into story format. And for me, reading should not happen in isolation. It should also have comprehension element, vocabulary building and all that. It should get a certain amount of natural automaticity. And for that, it needs to flow. And for that flow, it is important for, words to be put into sentences and then into stories so that you can build one can lead to the other. In such cases, sometimes you may have to come up with your own list of sight words, or according to what your curriculum textbooks are targeting. So depending on that, you can vary the order of this thing. Different reading schemes also have their own list of words. The list of sight words don't change. What changes is the order in which they introduce. So it doesn't matter how you introduce it, where you introduce it, as long as it is being used and applied. So that the word is not just taught as a word, but it is applied in context, which will facilitate comprehension, vocabulary, and lead on to writing skills as well.
So going along with the curriculum and individualizing it for the child is very important. Next, we have an extension question on very similar lines, ma'am. How long does it take for the child to master these sight words so that the special educator is aware when to stop or whether they're pushing the child a little further? How is that we'll be able to demarcate that, ma'am?
Well, if you look at the regular curriculum in most across the world, the sight words in English, they say, right from kindergarten, sight words are introduced. And by the end of grade 2 to grade 3, by the end of grade 3, most regular children should be able to, master these sight words. That is what by and large, most of the sight word lists say. One can, we can say, at least say safely throughout the primary, at least. With children with special needs, they'll be slower. So throughout, within the primary, at least most of the commonly used sight words at least can be introduced and children can master it. Again, as I said, we need to bear in mind what the challenges of the child are. If they have, very moderate to severe intellectual deficits, then definitely that will be a big impediment in teaching all the sight words. So as I said, you might introduce some of the initial sight words and the most commonly used ones, and then you may have to diversify into more functional oriented words. So sight words, yes. The regular child would take 5 academic years, let's say 2 years in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. So with our children, we can expect well into middle school, it might move on. And the other thing is, some of them might learn how to read it, but maybe they will still have trouble with the spelling and writing of it. But as long as they can read it, I would say move along. Because spellings, some of them, especially if they have reading difficulties, they, despite all the instruction you give, they may still continue to be very poor spellers. So it's okay, but at least if they can recognize the word, read, and it makes sense to their reading matter, that's fine.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing the specifics about it. Next, we have a question from Ms. Teresa, who wants to know how is that we can teach reading to children who are in beginners level at high school or elementary school level? Do we follow the same approach, or is there a difference in the approach that we need to take?
Well, we can follow the same approach. The only thing is, as they go, if they are well into middle school and high school, the amount of time you can devote to phonics and sight words is limited. But if the child needs it, then definitely you need to give it. At least, and here is where you have to, kind of balance it out. Like you have to give it some bit of phonics and sight word instruction has to, but that cannot form a big part of the remediation process, because by then the subject content matter has increased considerably. So then you need to think of other kinds of accommodations and modifications to help the child perform. But I would still use, maybe the worksheets need to be a little bit more, older children oriented at that point of time, if the child can handle it. So the worksheets may be a slightly more complicated, but the skills would still be the same. This is why we say that act early, because once a child gets into middle school, high school, and if you're working on these things, they tend to, the attitude of the children also is very difficult, because then they tend to think of these as baby stuff and they don't want to dwell on it. So it's better you start as early as possible, because then it doesn't get into a situation where the child is in high school and still doesn't know most of the phonics or sight words. So start early, but if they are there, I would still do some bit of phonics, but that cannot form a big part of the remediation program, simply because you have to devote time to other things. And here we use a lot, where obviously their reading would be affected. But that's when we come up with accommodations like, give them more, give them audio text, for example, so that because of their reading inability, at least their studying ability or gaining information ability is not it. So then you have to think of other accommodations and modifications.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for emphasizing on early intervention. Next, we have a question from Mr. Jacob, who wants to know how is that we can teach reading and spelling to children who have severe visual and auditory discrimination issues. She has a specific question in terms that she has a child who's 12 years old and has mild ID and severe reading as well as spelling issues. So after 3 years of remediation, the child is still finding it difficult to even recognize and read 2-letter words, nor the child is able to discriminate between the sounds of the alphabets. So what can be done in such cases, ma'am?
I would really like to know if when she means by remediation, has multisensory activities been done or not? If not, maybe the child needs a lot of that, because in many places, when they say remediation, they still tend to follow the worksheet or the paper pencil approach, writing the word several times and so on. So if the tactile kinesthetic method has and all the multisensory modalities have not been made use of, then I would suggest try to make use of it. But if the child has mild ID, as already 12 years old, and if all these things have still been done and the child is still struggling, then that is an indication that possibly this may not work with the child. right? So then that is where we have to make a choice of, introducing more functional oriented words and more words. Again, those will be whole words, words which should be used in their daily life. So for example, we would teach them to recognize their own name, or recognize their address, for example, and or recognize their as I said, in public places, they have to, see the words enter or exit, push, pull on the doors of, shops or malls or whatever you enter. So some of these kind of survival words will have to be taught in such cases. And usually those are taught as a whole word approach. And like I showed in many of the things, use the tactile, trace the word. The child may not really learn to spell it. It's not necessary to spell the word, but if the child can at least recognize the word and associate it with what needs to be done. For example, if the word is enter and the child knows that's the entry point, or if the child sees the word, toilet and knows that is the toilet, and also associate, because many of these public signs also have pictures that go with it, so associate those pictures and the words, and use a lot of tactile activities as well to help them, and also the frequency of exposure that matters. So not just teaching them on a desktop, but using that teaching in the real life environment. Especially for children who have ID, a lot of it needs to be done as much as possible in the natural environment where that word will appear. And so that kind of training needs to be given. So they can start from home initially, maybe in the school or in the classrooms. In the home, the word toilet can be put on, the toilet doors and so on with the sign or the picture. And then that can be transferred onto a public place toilet or something like that. On similar lines, this can be done. And again, repetitive training through multimodal ways. Tracing the thing. You can even have words with, embossed things with, so they can feel the word. And again, shape of the word helps. So all these kind of helps with pictures. So for children who do not kind of fall into that mainstream kind of learning and teaching reading, then you have to think of, functional literacy.
Functional literacy, practice and using multisensorial way is the key to go about it. Next, we have a question from Ms. Gayatri, who wants to know that the child has difficulty in pronouncing the sounds of R and as the sound of L. So what is the reason for it, and how is that we can correct the pronunciation of the child?
This is a very, very common sound error that we see in a lot of children. Especially if they're very young. In some of the r sound or the r sound especially develops much later. If you look at the linguistic development, sound development in children, r sound is something that develops much later. And with a lot of young children, if you've even noticed, children, even those who are neurotypical children, you'll find many of them tend to substitute the sound l for r. And then eventually they grow out of it. But some children don't, and therefore we need to, give, despite developmental maturity, they still continue to not get that sound. Here again, normally we show them the placement of the letter. We also get them to touch the throat. For example, when you say r, there's a greater vibration on your throat. When you say than when you say l. And then the placement of the tongue against the mouth or against the teeth, how the placement of the oral structures are with relation to each sound. You show that, you even use a mirror to do that. If you still find it difficult, getting the help of a speech and language pathologist also help, because they work a lot on these production of individual sounds. And initially what we do is we work on the placement and production of these individual sounds by showing how it is, the oral structures are placed while producing the sound, as well as the vibration by touching it. so that they understand the difference between the r and the l. Also, playing back what the child is saying. Record what the child is saying and play it back, and tell them which is the correct one and which is the incorrect one. So you can play your word and the child's word back to them, and ask them to choose, see which is the correct one. That is one way of doing it. And again, usually by the time with developmental maturity, many of the children do develop these sounds correctly. But with children who have special needs, definitely they need training. And speech and language pathologists will tell you most of these techniques are what they tell you. But it's the initial, just the sound isolation that is produced, and then they start using the sound in words. At the beginning of a word, middle of a word, end of a word, the same sound, and in different positions of the word. And then they start using the r words or l words in sentences. So again, it proceeds the same, the same uh, sequence that I talked about in reading. It's the same thing that they use even in the oral production of sounds and in words. First isolation, then words, and then sentences. But if it is getting very difficult, yes, definitely use the services of a speech and language pathologist.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for an elaborative answer. Next, we have a very similar question from Ms. Nisha, who wants to know the child has difficulty. She's 7 years old and she's slow in reading and gets confused with writing similar sounds words. She mixes the letter H and F now. And also initially she was getting confused with B and D, but they have rectified it. So is this a sign that the child is having learning disability? And what is that can be done? And also we have another question from Ms. Zahira right now, who wants to know the child has difficulty with M and N. So what can be done in such cases too? Very similar.
All the letter confusions, like we said earlier, whether it's B and D or H and F, M and N, all these use a multimodal methods. Use the desk cards, use the anchor charts, use the tactile kinesthetic mode, and associate the shape of the letter, anything to associate the shape of the letter with the sound. So the more different kinds of activities you do, you will find that children usually, when you do a multi-purpose kind of activities, multi-modal kind of activities, multi-sensory activities, these will eventually kick in. So, so then they begin to realize. And again, as I said, associate one particular letter to one particular clue picture. So wherever the M is coming, say, for example, if we use the clue picture as moon, as in moon. So always associate it with that one clue picture, and then they start making the connections. Some of these strategies really help.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next, we have a question from Ms. Shailaja, who wants to know if you could suggest some good reading books for children with the age range of 3 to 4 years to develop reading.
Lot of reading schemes are available. Scholastic brings a lot of good, sequenced reading material. If you look at the British side of it, I think Oxford Reading Tree brings a lot of things. Even Ladybird books. A lot of phonic based, reading series are available nowadays. So if you go online, you'll find a lot of phonic based beginner leader stories. Even online, you can find several websites which offer, like starfall.com is one which I really recommend. I've used that extensively. They have a lot of phonic and sight word reading and phonic stories to go with each. So even those, a lot of those are available. You can even get phonic or sight word, little stories printed offline. You can download and have free printable books nowadays. Pretty much a lot is available online. So if you just Google and go through, you can browse through some of the things, and you'll find things which are suitable for your child. Personally, I use Scholastic a lot. I've enjoyed using Scholastic. I use my own kit, which I've made, the early academic series for you, which is very sequential. So I use that as the main program, and then I add on, the Scholastic or other things that I get from the net as supplemental materials. And as I said, online you find a lot of things that are available. And young readers, Starfall is a wonderful resource to use.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your suggestions. Next, we have a question from Ms. Neha and also Ms. Shivali, who wants to know if you could re-explain the B and B technique with your hand and also the technique of eliminating, which you mentioned during the session.
Yeah. I'll go with the B and D first. It's holding your thumbs up, right? So if I would recommend that you hold your thumbs facing yourself. Okay, the thumb is up and the four fingers are facing yourself. So look at the left hand side. It is in the shape of a B, right? And the right hand side, the right hand is in the shape of a D. So B comes first in the alphabetical order. So B and then D. That is one way of identifying. So I hope I've made myself clear. You can also look up the net for this technique. They have a good picture, which shows how this is done. You can also have a picture of the hand actually being held up. You can get these pictures of the net also. So that can be done. But again, as I said, I get the children themselves to do it, because if they do it after a while, even if there's no picture on the wall, they have their hands with them all the time. So minimal material, they can still get themselves reassured before they write it on paper. So that is one way. The other one, what was the eliminating part of it, right? Yeah, any worksheet or where there are options given, something like a multiple choice. Okay, if there are 2 or 3 words given and a picture given, and the child has to choose the one word that is matching with the picture. So there again, what happens is you read all the 3 words, circle or match the correct word to the picture, and cross the others out. So you're trying to choose the correct one and discard the other ones. And this holds good even when you do math or any worksheets. Do that. And even when you do fill in the blanks, for example, if you're doing simple fill in the blanks also, once they read one sentence, take one of the words. When you choose it, either tick the word or circle the word. I prefer circling, because then the child gets more focused onto the word, so that they can look at the word and then write it down in the blank. And then, so when that is circled, then they know that is the one they have to pick and write. And once they finish writing it, they can cross it out. So they know that they don't have to look at that word again. Or even if it is a fill in the blanks, normally I don't even get them to cross it out. I just circle it. Once it is circled and written, it is done. So the next time they do the next fill in the blank, they do not have to look at the ones that they have already circled. So that saves time, that saves confusion also. And that also gives them an idea whether they've used all the words that has been given. This is one higher level. But again, even if, if you're giving letters, for example, you've given the picture of, say, goat, and you've given the beginning, the child has to circle the beginning letter. And you give them, say, 3 letters or 4 letters, and the child has to circle the letter G. So circle the letter G and then cross the others out. And when you're crossing the others out, I ask the child, so that again, you get a lot of repetition that way. Suppose the other letter was M. So goat. Does M make the G sound? No. Yes or no? So basically go into a yes, no thing. Yes, this is right. No, this is not right. They don't have to say it is M. Right now, they're focusing on the G sound for the goat picture. So is this G or is this not G? What it is not. That helps children to, pick what is necessary and eliminate what is not necessary. And this kind of lays the foundation for higher level. Because in the higher level reading also, when you have large passages, you have to quickly go through the important words. When you do comprehension and all that, you have to find the key words that will form the crux of the answer, and all the unnecessary information has to be discarded. So this is kind of a stepping stone towards that. And it can be used even in any subject that you teach, even math. For example, you have this count and the number of objects matching to the numeral, for example. So again, if several numbers are given and the number of objects is 1, they count the number of objects. So say it is 5 and the options 5, 8, and 10 are given. So circle 5. Okay, it is 5, so circle 5. Come to 8 and ask them, is this 5? No, it's not 5. Don't say it is 8, because right now our focus is 5. Count, the objects were 5 in number. So cross out, this is not 5, so cross it out. The other one also not 5, so cross it out. So do a scan and elimination. And that's a very, very important skill, which I think a lot of teachers, we tend to overlook these kind of skills. But this actually helps in the children, achieving better cognitive processing, which leads into much better reading and writing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for again demonstrating and also taking us through the complete technique. There are a lot of questions which are overflowing, but considering the time, I'll take one last question for today, which is from Mr. Shakir, who wants to know how is that we can orient and start English language learning to children whose focus is just based on mother tongue learning. Even in school, if they have a mother tongue based multilingual learning, but the parents are keen on introducing English language to the child, what is the starting point?
It depends on, again, it depends on each child. It depends on the environment they come from. Parents may be keen, but it is important to realize whether the child is up to it. See, again, if the child does have, disorders or other disability conditions, say, for example, if the child has intellectual disability, then introducing 2 languages may be very difficult. Or even if you're introducing English as the second language, probably the greater learning will take place in the mother tongue. And English may again be a secondary language where, probably you will just teach survival skills, survival reading, life skill reading. So again, but then there are children who can take both languages. And probably there are many children who outshine themselves in English, even though it is not their mother tongue. And not so much in the vernacular languages, sometimes purely because the vernacular languages are not, a lot of times what is spoken is not what is written and what is in the text matter or in the written language. Whereas in English, quite often, what you speak is what you read and write, especially in the early stages, So that helps. And I do find, like in bilingual or multilingual situations, there are a lot of children with special needs who tend to pick up English better than their mother tongue. And also a lot of the Indian languages in particular, and I know I've been in the Gulf countries where Arabic was a language, they find the alphabets, the vowels, and the number of alphabets in several of these languages far more intimidating and more complicated than English. So sometimes you tend to find they tend to take up English better. So watch for what is best suited for the child, what is more appropriate, and then go accordingly.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the amazing session and also answering all our questions patiently. We have learned a lot from you from today's session. I've seen that the feedback link has already been shared with you all. I'll request my team member to again share the feedback link on the chat box. Participants, do let us know how effective this session has been for you all. And if you're unable to submit your feedback, please try after some times, and you'll also receive a mail to submit your feedback survey again. So don't worry about it. Geetha ma'am, your final thoughts to share with our participants for today.
As usual, it's become very customary for me to say I do enjoy these workshops with Ability and the wide community you have out there. Great participants. It's very evident from the kind of suggestions that they give in whatever little interaction we are having virtually, that they are really involved and engaged and, thinking educators, basically. So I too enjoy getting such, getting an opportunity to speak to such great participants. And as usual, Ability, you're almost flawless when it comes to hosting these events. So makes my job easier as well with the tech support and all the other support that you provide. So yes, it's been a great evening, and I hope the evening is great for everyone, all the panelists, as well as the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you all participants for being an amazing audience. I'd like to let you all know that the recording of today's session, the slide deck, and the materials would be shared with you all. And you can also check out the events page link where all of this would be accessible. And also, don't forget to register yourself for our upcoming events, which is on strategies and techniques to improve academic outcomes of children with special needs, happening on the 11th of January, conducted by Ms. Shivani Wadhwa, followed by blending, segmenting, and spelling skills to enhance reading fluency, happening on the 20th of January, conducted by Madam Geetha Gopi N. All of these events would happen 4:30 p.m. Indian time, 6 p.m. Indonesian time, and 7 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do register yourself because we have very, very limited slots available. And also don't forget to share it with anyone who you think would benefit from it. Until we see you for the next time, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Stay safe. Take care.